What's up, guys? Welcome back to Little Red Garage. Back out in the shop working on the 78 Dodge Warlock today. Really close to firing this up, so I want to do everything that I can to prepare this engine for its first start. So we're going to be rechecking the timing. I'll go over why in a minute. We're going to be hooking up the battery, checking for power up here. We got to ground the ignition box still. But hooking up the battery, I want to make sure, first of all, there's no fires, there's nothing shorting. Then we'll check for power. If I get to the engine turning over, we'll check for spark. We'll also be filling the cooling system full of coolant, and we're going to pressure test it. I'll be hooking up the overflow tank, make a little hose for that. So let's get right into it. Enjoy the video. Alright, the first thing we're going to get into here is we're going to recheck the timing. I jumped ahead of myself a little bit last time. I was trying to find the top dead center on the number one piston, and I knew it was supposed to be on the compression stroke, but I never double checked to make sure it was actually on the compression stroke. When I saw the 0 come up and hit the line up perfectly there on the timing, I just assumed that that's where it was. And when I checked the distributor, we were 180 out. I didn't realize that the balancer can line up also at 0 on the exhaust stroke. So there's a pretty good chance the engine builder had it correct and I just made it 180 out. So I'm going to be double checking that. There's a couple ways you can do checking for you're on the compression stroke. You pull the spark plug and you put your thumb over it and you feel for compression. It's gonna be a little difficult because I'm by myself, and it's a little bit of work to get this to spin over unless I took all the plugs out. But I think I figured out or thought of a way I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna pull this breather and I'm gonna put the bore scope in here, and I'm gonna check out these two valves. So I should be able to tell the orientation of the valves. If one's open, it'll be down, and if they're both shut, the rockers should both be up, so they shouldn't be out of orientation, they should be together. So I should be able to maybe tell. I'm going to check there. If not, I could pop the valve cover off and we can get a perfect look at it, but I'm going to try to avoid that by looking through here. So let's do that real quick first. So it is a little bit hard to tell, but it does look like one of the valves is open. So I'm going to get over and spin the motor. Again, the piston at the top on the other timing mark, and see what it looks like then. Okay, now it looks like both the valves are much more even. And I also noticed, excuse me, as we were coming up to 0 this time around, that neither of the valves moved. So if it was the exhaust stroke, one of the valves would have opened to let the exhaust out. If it was intake stroke, one of them would have opened to let the intake in. But because both valves stayed shut while the piston was coming up, I believe now we're on the compression stroke. And I'm going to check quick again that the piston is actually at the top, which it is right there, and we're on 0. So what I'm going to do now is double check again, the distributor, and it should be 180 out, which is how I set it. I set it wrong last time, so I'm going to correct that. Okay, the distributor is back, turned around where it should be. Well, on the number 1 cylinder, top dead center, on the compression stroke. So that's all good. I left the distributor a little bit loose. It's snug, but it's loose enough where I can turn it. We're gonna have to fine tune the timing now that I've messed with it so much. Once we fire it up, I'll get a timing light and we'll fine tune that. I got a couple little grounds I want to hook up here, the ignition box and for this headlight wiring harness up here. And then we're going to jump under the truck, hook up the battery and check for fire, and then we'll start making sure we have power up here and things look good. Okay, we got our ignition box grounded. We got our wiring harness for the headlights grounded. Overflow tank installed with the hose hooked up to the radiator. So I'm going to jump under the back of the truck, hook up the battery, check for burning wires, and then we're going to see if we get power up here. Okay, I just hooked up the battery, ran back up here. I'm looking for smoke, any melting wires. I don't hear anything. I don't smell anything burning. It's the first time I've ever had power to this truck. I don't smell anything in here. Alright, well, why don't we turn the ignition on for the first time, see what happens. Oh, heard something there. That was weird. Yeah, I see the alternator gauge jumping, just a touch. So I can tell something's alive. Let me grab my test light and I'm going to start checking powers and grounds up here. Well, as soon as I turned the camera off, I was trying to figure out what that noise was. When I turned the key, it almost sounded like a fuel pump. It came on and stopped, and I'm like, the only thing it could have been was the wipers. They turned and stopped. So I came inside to make sure the wiper switch was off, and I smelled some electrical. Immediately opened the glove box. There was a little bit of smoke. I ran under the truck, disconnected the battery. It looked like we blew the fuse to the tail lights for whatever reason. I went and checked the wiring to the tail lights, and nothing's touching anything. All the wire ends are capped off. They're not hooked up to the tail lights yet. They're just hanging there. But I'm not sure what happened there. I undid the fuse panel, and I was checking underneath, and there's no wires burnt up. Everything looks really good. I'm not really sure what happened there. It smelled kind of more like you just soldered a connection, which is weird because there was a little piece of solder in there too, so it obviously got hot. But I took the fuse out, and I guess I'm gonna hook the battery back up and see what happens next. Alright, looks like we got a little bit of an electrical issue here. I checked in my manual, and this fuse actually is part of the ignition also. And so I took all the fuses out and I cleaned the terminals. I just put a little piece of like 120 grit sandpaper, got in here, cleaned all the terminals nice. I took the radio fuse out, which is also a 20 amp, the same as this. And even with the key turned off, as soon as I touch that, it pops the fuse. So we got an issue with that. I'm gonna have to chase. Luckily I have the Dodge truck manual and a little wiring diagram that I'm gonna have to get into. But I think right now I'm gonna fill this with fluid and pressure test the cooling system, because I rented this tool from the parts store and I want to get it back tomorrow. So let me get this set up and I'm going to show you how I'm going to pressure test the coolant system. Okay, we got the system full of coolant. This should take about 4 gallons. So what I did was I got some, picked this up at Walmart. It was really the cheapest place I could find. This was like $10 or $11, which is about $6 cheaper than the parts store. This is the concentrate. So 2 gallons of this and 2 gallons of distilled water should fill the system. I was able to get almost all of it in there. I got a little less than half a gallon left until I run the engine. But the pressure tester actually helped. I got about 2.5 gallons in there, and it wasn't really doing much. So I threw the pressure tester on there, pumped it up, and bled the air out, and I heard it start going through. So it actually helped get work some of the air bubbles out of the system. I'm currently at 15 psi. It's holding dead steady, so there's no leaks anywhere. I checked my manual, it said 15 psi. These caps are rated at about 16, so anything over the 15, they are going to open and let the fluid, the coolant, overflow into the tank. So it should never really see more than 15 psi. So, and it's holding rock steady for the last 10 minutes or so. So that's looking good. This kit worked out really well. It was $268 to rent from the parts store, but as soon as you give it back, they refund you 100%. So it actually doesn't cost anything. It's just a deposit. So I thought that worked out pretty well. It's not a tool that I felt that I needed to buy. So for free, I could rent it, just a deposit, and it worked out pretty well. If you end up getting the same kit, this power built 22-piece set, the number 50 was the correct cap, and it was even in that little manual there. It said Chrysler, and that's the one that ended up working. Alright, so I got an electrical gremlin that I gotta try to diagnose. Really wanted to try to start this thing next week, so you have to stay tuned for that. Like and subscribe if you haven't done that. End this video here. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll catch you next time.